Actually, though, she warned you against it. I suppose you could put it like that. Dickie paused and went on. I've told you about this dream of mine, not because it has anything to do with what happened after, at least I suppose it hasn't, but because it's the jumping-off point, as it were. You will understand now what I mean by the gypsy feeling. So I'll go on to that first night at the Laws. I'd just come back from the West Coast then. It was awfully rum to be back in England again. The Laws were old friends of my people's. I hadn't seen the girls since I was about 7, but young Arthur was a great pal of mine, and after he died, Esther used to write to me and send me out papers. Awfully jolly letters she wrote. Cheered me up no end. I always wished I was a better hand at writing back. I was awfully keen to see her. It seemed odd to know a girl quite well from her letters, and not otherwise. Well, I went down to the Law's place first thing. Esther was away when I arrived, but was expected back that evening. I sat next to Rachel at dinner, and as I looked up and down the long table, a queer feeling came over me. I felt someone was watching me, and it made me uncomfortable. Then I saw her. Saw who? Mrs. Howarth, what I'm telling you about. It was on the tip of Macfarlane's tongue to say, I thought you were telling me about Esther Laws, but he remained silent, and Dickie went on. There was something about her quite different from all the rest. She was sitting next to old Laws, listening to him very gravely with her head bent down. She had some of that red tulle stuff round her neck. It had got torn, I think. Anyway, it stood up behind her head like little tongues of flame. I said to Rachel, Who's that woman over there, dark, with a red scarf? Do you mean Alistair Howarth? She's got a red scarf, but she's fair, very fair. So she was, you know. Her hair was a lovely, pale, shining yellow. Yet I could have sworn positively she was dark. Queer what tricks one's eyes play on one. After dinner, Rachel introduced us, and we walked up and down in the garden. We talked about reincarnation. Rather out of your line, Dickie. I suppose it is. I remember saying that it seemed to be a jolly sensible way of accounting for how one seems to know some people right off, as if you'd met them before. She said, You mean lovers? There was something queer about the way she said it, something soft and eager. It reminded me of something, but I couldn't remember what. We went on jawing a bit, and then old Laws called us from the terrace, said Esther had come and wanted to see me. Mrs. Howarth put her hand on my arm and said, You're going in? Yes, I said, I suppose we'd better. And then, well, it sounds such rot. Mrs. Howarth said, I shouldn't go in if I were you. He paused. It frightened me, you know. It frightened me badly. That's why I told you about the dream, because, you see, she said it just the same way, quietly, as though she knew something I didn't. It wasn't just a pretty woman who wanted to keep me out in the garden with her. Her voice was just kind and very sorry, almost as though she knew what was to come. I suppose it was rude, but I turned and left her, almost ran to the house. It seemed like safety. I knew then that I'd been afraid of her from the first. It was a relief to see old Laws. Esther was there beside him. He hesitated a minute and then muttered rather obscurely, There was no question. The moment I saw her, I knew I'd got it in the neck. Macfarlane's mind flew swiftly to Esther Laws. He had once heard her summed up as 6'1" of Jewish perfection. A shrewd portrait, he thought, as he remembered her unusual height and the long slenderness of her, the marble whiteness of her face with its delicate down-drooping nose, and the black splendour of hair and eyes. Yes, he did not wonder that the boyish simplicity of Dickie had capitulated. Esther could never have made his own pulses beat one jot faster, but he admitted her magnificence. And then, continued Dickie, we got engaged. At once? Well, after about a week. It took her about a fortnight after that to find out that she didn't care after all. He gave a short, bitter laugh. It was the last evening before I went back to the old ship. I was coming back from the